Hello everyone, it's AG, and today I am finally doing my review on Edogawa Ranpo's Japanese Tales of Mystery and Imagination. I've been talking about this book for over a year now, and I think I wrote my review back in July, something like that, July, August, but it's taken me almost an entire year to actually film it. That is tending to happen to a lot of my videos. I'm just so busy with, school and life. But nevertheless, I am here today to talk about both the author and the book. Hirai Taro, who is mainly known under the pseudonym of Edogawa Ranpo, was born on the 21st of October 1894 in Nabari, Japan. He spent his childhood in Nagoya and went to university in Tokyo. He attended Waseda University and majored there in economics. At the age of 29, he decided to devote the rest of his life to writing mystery stories, but before that he had a ton of different jobs. He worked as a clerk, an accountant, assistant editor of a newspaper, and an advertising solicitor. At this time, there weren't actually any Japanese people who were writing modern detective stories. There was actually only one single mystery magazine being published throughout the whole of Japan called Shin Seinen, and it actually only published translated American and European stories. Ranpo ended up writing a story called Nisen Doka, which is the 2-sen copper coin, and he sent it into that magazine and actually got it published, after which Shinseinen invited him to write more. As Ranpo continued to write his stories, his reputation surely and steadily started to grow, and so this is how he eventually came to be Japan's first modern mystery writer, and now he's actually considered to be the father of Japanese mystery writing, because at this moment mystery is a huge genre within Japanese literature. Now, before I really get into the book, I just wanted to share a very fun anecdote with regards to the translation. So this book was translated by James B. Harris quite a while ago. I believe somewhere in the 60s or 50s. Yeah, in 1956, around that time, or even earlier, because this is when he wrote the preface. So yeah, I'll just read this section. So this was written by the translator. A brief description of the manner in which this book was translated may also prove to be of interest to the reader, for it was undertaken under unique conditions. Edogawa Ranpo, while fully capable of reading and understanding English, lacks the ability to write or speak it. On the other hand, the translator, a Eurasian of English-Japanese parentage, while completely fluent in spoken Japanese, is quite unable to read or write the language, as he was educated solely in English schools. Hence, for each line translated, the two collaborators, meeting once a week for a period of 5 years, were forced to overcome manifold difficulties in getting every line just right. The author reading each line in Japanese several times and painstakingly explaining the correct meaning and nuance, and the translator sweating over his typewriter, having to experiment with sentence after sentence until the author was fully satisfied with what had been set down in English. And I just think that that's such a funny, quirky thing to know. It's really cool just to know, like, this took 5 freaking years to get translated. But yeah, it's well worth the work, because this is a great collection of short stories, in my opinion. So yeah, in total there are 9 stories, and I enjoyed all of them save for one, but I'll get to that later on. Also, if you are in need for content notes, those are in the description box down below, so you can check that out if you're not too sure if you want to hear everything I'll be discussing in this review. Yeah. Anyway, back to the book. One of the things that I thought was very interesting was that reading these stories really reminded me of Roald Dahl's stories. Like, he, of course, had all those kid stories like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but he also used to write a lot of very dark horror short stories targeted towards adults, and I read a bunch of those or listened to a bunch of those like 5 or 6 years ago, and I really enjoyed them. I liked the setup of the stories. A lot of these stories had this type of arc of suspense where things would slowly and steadily get worse and worse until you got to the end, and there would just be this huge twist. And that is something that I experienced with these stories as well. So if you like those type of stories that sort of hit you out of the left field, I'm so bad at English sayings, but like stories with unexpected twists, then I would recommend these stories and those of Dahl as well. But yeah, it's cool, seeing these two authors that come from entirely completely different worlds, and you can still draw parallels. But then again, if you look at it from the perspective of where are these authors getting their inspiration from, Edogawa loved Arthur Conan Doyle, loved Edgar Allan Poe, which is the person he took his pseudonym from. So yeah, I guess that really just goes to show how much of an impact what you read has on your writing, which is kind of like duh, but still, I think it's cool because all of these stories are set in Japan, and so they feel incredibly Japanese, but they still have this Western familiarity, in my opinion at least. Also, if you are a fan of Junji Ito, I would highly recommend you to check out this collection because Ito is also a fan of ranpo. He has actually adapted a couple of his stories. I'm pretty sure at least 2. And one of them is one of his most popular pieces, The Human Chair. It's also one of my favorites of Ito. So yeah, this collection actually includes that story. It's really cool to be able to read the original and then you go back to read the manga and see what type of, how would you call that, liberties Ito has taken with the adaptation. At least that's something I think is always very cool. So yeah, would highly recommend you pick this one up as a Junji Ito fan. Oh, and for those who might not know what The Human Chair is all about, I think it might be good to actually explain that to you. So the story is about this extremely successful female author and a carpenter. Now, the author has recently bought a very luxurious chair, and this carpenter sends her a letter, something like that, really, really long. And he talks about his life as a carpenter and how he got the task to create this incredibly luxurious chair for a hotel. And he thought, you know what? This is my chance. I am going to build a compartment inside of this chair so that I can stay in the hotel and then at night steal stuff from people. And so that is what he does. But whilst staying in that chair during the day, obviously people are going to sit on it. And that feeling of people sitting on him awakens something in him. And that's all I'll say about the story for now. But it's really, really good. I would highly recommend it. It's creepy, and I would say that the adaptation of Junji Ito is also very creepy and just excellent. By the way, the manga adaptation of The Human Chair is currently in print in English, and it can be found in Ito's collection called Venus in the Blind Spot, for those who are trying to look for it. Now, this collection really is a mixed bag of stories. You have murder mysteries from the perspective of the murderer, a story in which they take up the identity of the victim, one written completely in dialogue, another story in which a person just descends into madness due to distorting his reflections by means of mirrors. And due to this large variety, I actually never really got bored. Now, I also wanted to note that this piece is a product of its time, and so it does actually feature some ableism. I think there are one or two ableist comments in the story called The Crippled Man, but the worst definitely is the caterpillar. Now, the thing that made me incredibly uncomfortable and sad when it came to the caterpillar was the fact that the element of horror came from the fact that one of the main characters was severely disabled. And the way they got treated, it was absolutely horrific. It was awful all around. So I don't know. It wasn't something that I would recommend anyone to read, if I'm being really honest. To give you some context, the story is about a woman who is now taking care of her husband who was severely injured during the war. He has lost both of his legs, both of his arms, his hearing, and I believe several pieces of his face as well. Because of his appearances now, his wife is completely repulsed by him, and so instead of actually taking care of him, she abuses him severely. And unfortunately, this is part of a long history within literature and I guess media as a whole, where disabled people are first of all treated as less than human and are cast as the villain of the story, where their disabilities are used as an element of horror. And it's just very frustrating to see how this type of trope is still very prevalent within the horror genre and within media as a whole, because it's just such bad representation and it only adds to the stigma that there already is when it comes to disabilities. And so I can only hope that this will get better in the future. It's definitely promising seeing what's happening within literature, at least. More stories are coming out that are centered around disabled people and not in just one single way where you, the reader, are supposed to, feel bad for them, but just stories where they are depicted as any regular human being. So yeah, I am hopeful for the future. Anyway, the rest of the collection really focuses on the horror that comes from people's greed, arrogance, and obsession. The stories explore what happens when people have a bit too much of a certain type of characteristic, or when people just want a bit too much of something. Most of the characters are very dissatisfied with their current situation, and so they don't care whether or not they end up hurting people in order to get to where they want to be. And it's exactly this drive that leads to their downfall. Like I said previously, there are so many twists and turns, and so I found myself either gasping in horror very often or just laughing out loud. I don't know, it was just such an interesting collection. I just love the experience of being taken on a journey by an author and just being absolutely horrified by what is happening, and then all of a sudden, at the end, you're just so stunned, you don't know what else to do other than just laugh out loud. I don't know. Does that make me sound very creepy? I love all this death and destruction. Anyway, this was definitely the case with both the human chair and the red chamber, and that's also why those were my favorite two stories of the collection. And yes, that is everything I had to say with regards to Japanese tales of mystery and imagination. Yes, finally, after almost an entire year, I have finally reviewed it. I hope you enjoyed this review. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy the content that I make on this channel, perhaps consider supporting me by getting me a coffee or joining my Patreon. I have a classics book club. So every month we come together on Discord to discuss a classic from all over the world. You get to join in and pick which one will be reading the next month. And also I have a Discord in general where we just chat about all things that we enjoy. And so yeah, that's about everything. If you're interested in that, I'll leave a link to my Patreon in the description box. Anyway, like I already said, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in another video. Cheers!